The paradox is then, why do we say that we're animal lovers while we still eat animals?
So hello and welcome to episode 7 of the Anthrozoology podcast. And today we're going to discuss meat eating and veganism and what is known as the meat paradox. So my name is Kris. I'm a PhD student at the University of Exeter, and my research looks at cat-human relationships and social discourses surrounding free-roaming cats.
Hi, my name's Sarah. I'm also at the University of Exeter, and I'm a PhD student looking at shark-human interactions.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Exeter, and my research takes me to Nepal, where I study human-elephant interactions and captive elephant health and welfare. I'm also a teacher at Beacon College in Leesburg, Florida.
Hello, I'm Bryan Cushing. I am an instructor with Michelle in the Anthrozoology program at Beacon College.
Hi, I'm Lynda M Korimboccus, a former master's student at University of Exeter. I'm now an independent scholar, editor-in-chief of the Student Journal of Vegan Sociology, and I teach sociology at West Lothian College in Scotland.
So part of our discussion today is on the meat paradox, and Lynda has written a paper called the Peppa Pig Paradox, talking about children's perceptions of animals in cartoons and meat eating. Lynda, do you want to tell us a little bit about your paper?
Yeah, I wish I hadn't put so much alliteration in it now. I have to talk about it so much. But yeah, the Peppa Pig Paradox is based on Lothian and others' meat paradox, which is now about a decade old, the paper, which discussed the divisions between our behaviour and our belief systems. So we might believe that certain animals are for certain purposes, pets or entertainment or what have you, and then other animals are for eating. So that's about categorization essentially. The paradox is then, why do we say that we're animal lovers while we still eat animals, albeit that they're different species? So all I did really, and it had been hinted at in a couple of different other papers, all I did was say, well, that's maybe you can understand if you've been socialized, children been socialized into accepting that different animals belong or have different purposes for humans, which is obviously part of the problems that we have. But what if it's the same animal? What if it's the same species? So at the time, my daughter was 4, I think. I was doing one of the modules on the master's program in Anthrozoology, and I got an opportunity just to write something about. I was actually quite annoyed at Peppa Pig at the time. It probably had part of it to do with it, but we were at a show. There's kids going to see Peppa Pig, love, all their stuff all dressed up and buying things in the foyer of the theatre and stuff. It's a live show, and then they were eating ham salads and sandwiches and things, and I thought, this seems a little bit odd. Not long after that, there was a cinema experience came out, and there's the kids again loving Peppa Pig, talking to the Peppa Pig dressed up woman, man, could be, I'm not sure, in the foyer, and then going and ordering a hot dog on the way in to watch the Peppa Pig experience. So this was just getting, I just wondered, I understand the paradox. It's quite straightforward. We're a nation of animal lovers, but only certain animals. Current kind of furore about horse milk again. It's happening again. People are going, oh, that's disgusting. It's a mammal. We're taking its milk to drink. It's the same thing as a cow or whatever. But when it's the same animal, it just seems really bizarre. So my paper just looks at investigating all the different reasons that these things might be possible. Most of it comes down to socialization, and I settled on really what's called strategic ignorance. Where it's just easier. It's easier for parents not to be as honest with kids because they know what kids would do a lot of the time, right? Kids are kind, kids have compassion, mostly. I don't want to get into, I suppose, a biological debate. I'm not sure. Maybe that's not true, but I think kids have a tendency to want to be kind to animals, and yet they're fed them on a sometimes daily basis. So that's really what I was looking at. And I don't... That maybe was a bit of a longer explanation than necessary, but that's ultimately what the paper is about.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned strategic ignorance, because I think on my own part I engage in that. So I've been a vegetarian since I was about 13. I wouldn't call myself a vegan because I keep falling off the wagon. It's almost like I justify it. It's like I really do have issues with the dairy industry, and a little bit with the egg industry. So I have issues, but also it's kind of hard being vegan. And I recognize it in myself. I want to believe in like the happy cows and the happy hens. And I think, so I actually wrote a paper that will be coming out next month that looks at how hens are represented on egg boxes. So, and it feeds into this belief people want to have that in happy hens and ethical farming.
Yeah.
So there's a market there, because nobody wants to believe that they're immoral or and I think it's a lot easier with animal products than with meat, because there's no killing involved, and I recognize from my own psychology that that's how I justify it. It's like, you don't need to kill anybody for milk and eggs. So and a lot of it is that I put my head in the sand, and I'll confess that. And
yeah, but you know what? Recognizing it's half the battle. A lot of people are doing this stuff and it's so subconscious they don't even realize. So I guess at the end of my paper, what I'm trying to do, I'm glad to hear that's coming out, by the way, because that's the kind of thing that annoys me. Every time I see an advert for the Happy Egg Company, I'm shouting at the telly. I won't say what I say, because it would probably not be allowed to be broadcast. But yeah, it's easier. It's just easier for everyone if you've got habits. And you also, I think back to what I was fed when I was younger. It wasn't even meat. Sometimes it was really highly processed food too. So there's all the kind of elements of addiction to salt and sugar and the casein. It's just it's easier. It's much easier. And I'm not sure that being vegan is as difficult now as it certainly was when I first went vegan. I became a better cook because of it, so that's something. But I think it's probably easier now than ever before.
I thought it was interesting in your paper where you wrote that some people believe that raising your child vegan means that you're forcing your beliefs upon your child, or whoever's raising their children. But and as you say, it seems it's such the norm that kids are made or kids eat meat that is not considered forcing opinions on children. Do you want to say a bit more about that?
Yeah, well, that's basically what we came to. And it's interesting because actually the discussion that I had, I wasn't even a parent at that point. It was before that. I just was in the lunchroom. There I am with my hummus and cucumber sandwich or something. And I remember getting the kind of, what have you got today kind of question. I thought, see if you really want to know that, I'm happy to share my lunch with you. But we had this bizarre discussion where it was, you can't force your views on your children like that. And this person was particularly heavily religious, I was aware of. And I said, but everyone forces their views on their kids. Meat eating was forced on me, not against my will. I ate it. I wasn't going, no, I don't want it. And I was being, force fed or anything. So, but that was the kind of implication. And I thought, surely every parent wants to do the right thing for their kids, and whatever they do practically, whether it's about religion, whether it's about diet, whether it's about healthy, exercise, whatever, everyone does what they think is the best thing. So it isn't any different, but somehow it's demonized. And there's a lot of papers talking about how veganism is stigmatized in a lot of different ways. And I suppose ultimately, though, the World Health Organization, the British Dietetic Association, all these different experts are quite happy that a plant-based diet certainly is absolutely super healthy as any other, if not more so. So for people to have an issue with it, I just found really, really fascinating. And actually that particular colleague didn't speak to me for some time after that.
Wow.
Because it became more of a table discussion than just her and I, and people could see what I was trying to say, which was her forcing her religion was on her kids was the same. I wasn't having a go at the religion. I was just trying to make the comparison. But yeah, it's so normative. People don't even question. They only question something that seems to be deviant. and veganism still is counted as that, unfortunately.
It did make me wonder that maybe we should allow kids to eat what they want. And of course, people would say immediately no, because all they would eat was spaghetti and ketchup or something like that. But, you know, there does seem to be a lack of agency for kids to decide, you know. And I don't know if there are any studies done where kids are allowed to choose between a vegan meal, a vegetarian meal, and a meat meal. Do you know any of those?
No, I don't know about any with. Well, it depends on what age of children you're talking about as well. Because you've got to remember, I suppose, I mean, up to a certain point, they couldn't have any agency.
Yeah.
So I suppose it's maybe even the same argument about, you know, whether breast is best. You know, mothers make a decision either consciously or because of some other, you know, medical issue or something in terms of feeding their kids, whether or not they breastfeed or whether they bottle feed. So decisions are already made for kids. In fact, before they're born, what a mother's eating while she's pregnant, for example, can have an effect on the child. So, or not eating or drinking or what have you, right? So I don't know if it's appropriate for kids to have agency up to a point. But I do think that it's important that parents have responsibility, and that doesn't always follow. And if you've been taught that this is the best thing to do and that meat's healthy and it's necessary, then, and that's what the Meat Paradox talks about, and Melanie Joy's work about why we eat pigs, wear cows, love dogs, one of those, or in some order. It's the thing, it's like that's just what we do. Anyway, sorry.
Well, it's been interesting. I have a grandson. And my daughter is a vegetarian and has been a vegetarian for probably since she was about 10 or 11.
Wow.
And she chose to do that back when I was vegetarian. And she's faced a lot of difficulties with her son because she also has a lot of food allergies. And my other daughter has severe food allergies. And so in an attempt to prevent her son from having food allergies, she has offered him different meat products to try to build his tolerance. And it's been very difficult on her to say, I mean, she would like to raise him as a vegetarian. Her husband's not a vegetarian, but you know, it's been that balance between, you know, the morals and the knowing what it was like to live with these food allergies. So she's trying to balance that, but maybe more interestingly is she does a lot of research. She's a researcher, and she has found so many links between early childhood sugar exposure and future weight gain and tendency toward diabetes that she has opted not to give him any sugar before 2. And you would think that she has decided to, you know,
deprive him of life,
his feet or something. The way people react to that, they just simply cannot believe that you would withhold sugar from your child until they're 2, but he has no desire to eat sugar. He has no craving for sugar. You know, it's not like he's going to the cabinet and asking for cookies. He has no interest in that. So
if you've never tasted it, you don't miss it, do you? You're not going to know. And actually, processed sugar in particular is awful. Refined sugar is terrible. Natural sugars in fruit and some vegetables, fine. You know, but I did the same with Maya. Unfortunately, we did introduce vegan chocolate. Probably, I should have just left it. But anyway, now it's like oh, please, I've not had anything naughty all week. If I just said that this morning, I've been really good. So,
Michelle,
we argue about these things. You know, we judge people based on what they feed their children, and even if they're trying to be healthier.
Michelle, can I ask about the allergies? Why did your daughter particularly think it was the lack of meat that had created allergies in herself? Was she told that as by a doctor?
No, and it wasn't the lack of meat. It was just exposure to everything. Introducing, so she had to do single food introductions, and then she had to do them for a week at a time. And they just recommended that he get exposed, you know, in a certain order to essentially everything that he might run into in his life, so that he could, you know, not end up with food allergy. And he's 20 months and has no food allergies. And both my children, especially my younger one, were severely impacted by food allergies. So
it sounds like an unfortunate coincidence more than anything else, doesn't it? I mean, I know when we moved off, you know, I stopped feeding Maya myself. She was about 6 or 7 months. Just out of sheer exhaustion more than anything else. But there was only a few soya formulas at that point, and I was really frowned upon for even just thinking about that stuff while she was so young. because of a potential link with soya allergy and whatnot. And I
Mhm.
thought, well, okay, but dairy allergies much more prevalent than soy
Well,
allergies. So like, I'd rather take the, I just don't want her ingesting that.
Right. Well, my
Rubbish, yeah.
younger one was actually allergic to breast milk. So she was at
Really?
3. Yeah. Oh, yeah. She had serious problems. And at about 3 months is when they diagnosed her. And so we
Wow.
had to switch to formula. And so I had to face the militant breastfeeding group of people and say, well, yeah, I would like to breastfeed. I can't because it will kill my child.
Wow.
But yeah, putting those, she actually had to have a specialized formula. It was made for children with cystic fibrosis. It's all pre-digested.
Okay.
And so, yeah, but there was, again, that pressure from
It's huge.
outside that like we were doing the wrong thing, or it's just interesting to me that we've so normalized like the sugar that that nobody even thinks about it.
No, I watched a program called, I think it was called The Truth About Sugar, and the opening 5 minutes was this little kid who didn't even have his he still had his baby teeth, getting extractions because of the Coca-Cola. It was other brands of cola are purely available, but it was in a so-called developing country where some of these big brands had managed to get in and persuade people that to put it in a bottle that was healthful. Just, people will fall for the right marketing, will make us do anything, right? Anyway, sorry, I'm chatting too much here. Brian's very quiet. What do you think, Brian?
Always quiet. I think a couple of interesting things, something Michelle mentioned before, this idea of, and I think the whole conversation, but when something deviates off the norm, I think it makes people sometimes feel like, am I doing the wrong thing? So let me be super aggressive and criticize you for, choosing to do something different. I don't think it necessarily comes from a bad place. I think it comes from a vulnerable place as well.
Yeah.
And it honestly makes me sad that it's so hard just to have conversations without, it turning into a debate or, people feeling like they're being attacked, especially when it comes to, how you feed your children. And I just don't think there's enough education out there, especially, we think about doctors and, the amount of nutrition they get is like minimal, apparently, which is really disturbing as well. Because I feel like so many of our problems come from food, our health issues and things like that. Whether it's sugar addiction, milk. I was addicted to milk growing up. It was like water to me. My mom would buy me my own gallons because I would drink everyone else's milk. And it was just, I would wake up in the middle of the night, instead of getting a glass of water, I'd get a glass of milk. It was definitely an addiction for sure.
Yeah. It's major. And I think it's important what you say there about it being, it is a defensive position that people take. The very fact that someone is different challenges someone else's norm, right? So, and that's the same for anything, not even just about the food you eat, but the very fact, I know it's happened to me a lot, and that example at work was just one where I think people assume that I'm judging them because I've made an ethical decision. So, and it always comes out because there's food, well, not so much recently, we've all been stuck in the house, but if you're somewhere and you're eating, and then you're the token vegan, blah, 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 and then you have to have that conversation when you just want to have something to eat. But I think people then start to just imagine straight away, again, to do with the stigma and the kind of stereotyping of veganism, that somehow you're then judging them. And rather than deal with that, the defenses come up. And yeah, it's really sad. I agree. I think it's really a shame that people are put in a position where they're so protective over something that they feel they've chosen, but they didn't choose, right? Society picked it. And that's why there's vegan sociology now. That's why Anthrozoology's got so much to do with this, right? We can't change what's happening to the animals in the world until we start altering what we think is normal, whether that's elephants or sharks or cats or right, or just a steak or an egg and chips or whatever it is. So yeah, it's a shame.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask Brian about conservation, and I was thinking about obviously the meat paradox, and I was wondering if there's like a conservation meat paradox. Are conservationists generally vegan? And if not, why not? And how is that justified? Because I was looking today about the amount of land use for livestock production, the amount of water use, etc., loss of biodiversity, specifically beef production related to the tropics, the Amazon rainforest being cut down. So I wanted to ask whether you come across conservationists talking about veganism, being defensive, not being defensive, changing to veganism, and if you know anything about that.
Yeah, I can't really say for sure, but, just in anecdotally, I don't really see it come up that often. I think it usually really comes from a vegan perspective or a vegetarian perspective. And I just think about conferences, whether it was about, wildlife, anthrozoology, companion animals. I mean, they serve tons of meat dishes at these conferences. And I think that kind of, lends itself to the idea of the paradox as well, that, we talk about this stuff, talk about saving the environment, wildlife, habitat, but let's serve, hamburgers and hot dogs and, which I understand. It's tough, it's expensive to probably get vegan catering and things like that. And you want to appeal to people, especially if you're trying to raise money. But, we have to look at it. We have to at least just acknowledge it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Do either of you know anybody? Does anybody know of any conservation groups that are
fully vegan? No, not fully vegan ones. Oh, maybe there are some. It's been my experience certainly that a lot of even our local cats protection branch would have meat sandwiches at their AGMs or meetings and things. So, but I think that's down to this labelling of what's appropriate at what point in time. And even when I ran an alliance of animal rights groups in Scotland, and I'm talking about the length and breadth, mostly central Scotland, but there were people coming out on animal rights demos who weren't vegan, and I didn't understand it. But then that was my ignorance too. It was my naivety, thinking, again, going back to, there was a leaflet that I picked up. I've been speaking about it recently. I picked up a leaflet at a Greenpeace stall. It was actually. I'm presuming that person was vegan now in hindsight, because I now know that the leaflets they had were vegan group leaflets. It was a Viva leaflet, I think, or Animal Aid or something. And I had to cut the little thing out the back and write my name and address on it, post it, wait for the stuff to arrive back at the house. So, I mean, I went vegetarian on the spot, but I still didn't really understand about the plight of dairy calves in particular. And I loved cows. So this stuff arrived and I went vegan, and I naively thought that all I had to do was tell other people, because I didn't know. And now I knew. So now I just tell other people and then they'll know. What a fool that I was. So I became Mrs. Unpopular very quickly. And I was a bit angry and kind of shouty and whatnot. And I just thought I just had to tell people. But this stuff is so ingrained, and even if it isn't in the conservation movement, or if it's domesticated animal campaigners or welfare campaigners, even in when I worked for a local animal protection group in Scotland, I think we were a minority, the vegans in the organisation, and we campaigned against fox hunting, hare coursing. We were part of the US hedgehog relocation program when they were being eaten by ground. The hedgehogs were eating the ground nesting birds. All the things that we did, and then it was like, well, maybe we could do a meat-free Monday. Like, really, is that the best we've got?
Yeah.
And we're supposed to be the animal people, and if we can't even be vegan. But then I think there's a difference as well, which is probably important to say. There's a really distinct difference between being plant-based in terms of your diet and being a vegan in terms of, I think that's much more an ethical lifestyle. And that's why I'm not a PhD candidate quite yet. I'm just about there. I've been accepted. I just haven't started yet. But I'm going to be looking at vegan children and what their experience is like. Now there are some. There's more than just a couple. My daughter being one of them. What's it like for them when they're out and about and they're meeting other kids who've got pets, but who still eat like a ham sandwich at lunchtime? What's that experience like when they're in the classroom and they're these are farm animals, not farmed, farm. These are farm animals. These are zoo animals. These ones give us milk. These ones give us wool. These ones give us eggs. Oh, thanks very much. Right? This kind of, and I don't want to appear patronising, but it's so ingrained and nobody questions that. So that's what I'm going to be doing. This needs to be challenged. Sorry, Michelle.
Well, I just want to flip the flip that on its head for a minute, because I was reading this really interesting article that actually I found quite humorous, because it actually was based on Tom Regan, animal rights, his least harm principle, that we should minimize harm to the animals. That's why we should adopt a vegan diet. And so this is S.L. Davies, came out in about 2003. What he did is he measured the amount of animals that were killed to produce a vegan diet. And people, of course, said, what do you mean animals killed? Well, there's a lot of unintentional death associated.
Insecticides and stuff. Is that what he was talking about?
Well, insecticides, decapitated rabbits in the field, voles being killed. And they actually estimated that to produce a vegan diet for everyone for the USA would still kill about 1.8 billion animals a year, because of our current farming processes. So what he said, he actually, crunched the numbers to see what would be the most humane way, working off of Reagan's least harm principle. What would be the most ethical way to feed, in this case, the United States? And what he came up with that would be that fewer animals would be killed, like almost like 500 million fewer animals would be killed if we ate large herbivores only. So if we stuck to cows, especially cows, we would actually save 500 million animals a year more than having a vegan diet. So I'm just curious to get Bryan and Lynda's kind of take on that. And if you're looking at it truly from an animal harm standpoint, and of course we have to consider intention. We intentionally kill farmed animals, and we accidentally kill animals for vegan food. What's your take on that? Is it worth examining this least harm principle?
I think you could. I mean, certainly that's when I did my philosophy degree, this utilitarian, greatest harm, greatest happiness versus least harm. I think I started with that, so I agree with that kind of idea. I think accidental death in the process of you get that thing about, is it the avocado argument, that avocados are more harmful than, therefore that justifies somebody else eating pigs, that kind of thing. Because I would imagine, in fact I know for sure, if you compare the vegan 1.8 billion or whatever that figure was with how many animals are killed when people eat meat, generally, whether it's pigs or chicken or fish, and that's fishes, and they're not even measured as individuals, they're measured by the ton. So I'm pretty sure that would be better. But yeah, I was at a talk recently, I'm going to be writing a review about it, about what's the best diet for our health, for the planet, for animals. And that's a kind of similar thing. This large cow eating thing is apparently going to be less harmful overall. But I think, there's all sorts of other ways of doing things. There are ways of manufacturing plants without it having to be in a field that requires insecticides or large combine harvesters. And I think we just need to rethink things. But I understand the argument. I do.
I think his numbers he came up with, if we fed only large ruminants, we would have to slaughter 1.3 billion animals a year, as opposed to the 1.8.
But feed them what? Feed them what, Michelle? Because
the US.
No, feed them what? Because you're talking about. I don't know if Bryan's going to mention something like this. Maybe Bryan wants to go first, because I have a response to your question.
Yeah, so I have I think it's different. I think it's different for every person who's vegan, why they're vegan, why they went vegan. I'm really interested in that idea, because I like this idea of like the degree to which you impact as an individual, kind of versus looking at the masses. Because you could have someone who lives on a farm, right? They eat their own animals, they grow their own vegetables, versus say like a vegan who eats a highly processed diet. With tons of plastic wrapped food, the energy that goes into making that food. I wish it was easier to come up with those formulas to kind of measure for the individual, because it's really complex. There's just so many factors that go into it. And then, the idea of, growing vegetables and stuff. And I don't know if this is what Sarah was going towards, but, feeding the cows that we are growing, right? They need crops. So those things will still be happening, regardless. But I think it's a fair conversation to look at, how are you as an individual? What is your kind of like, we can look at, I guess, ecological footprint is a good way. But yeah, I'm always interested in that. And, could you have a meat eater who's more sustainable than a vegan?
Do we call it a paw print then?
Paw print, yeah, your
like
carbon
that.
paw print.
I
Well,
like
he was
that.
mentioning in the article that it is, it's production of forage, meaning you would need pasture-based forage for your large ruminants so that they would go graze, and that's a more efficient way. So in other words, part of the problem is cutting down your tractor and equipment use, because that's what kills the animals. Yeah. So
yeah, I get that argument. I suppose my ethics are more developed across time, to be honest. First of all, it was just like, oh, I'm not doing this anymore. I can't be a part of this. And I'm now, it's much more about just the principle of taking something that doesn't belong to me, whatever that is, whether it's the animal themselves or something that we think that they give us. But yeah, I think it's very complex, Brian. You're absolutely right. There's so many things to measure within this, and then it's human measurements as well on top of everything, isn't it? What do we value as, what do we measure as harm, and what's this harm over that harm, and that kind of thing. So it gets very complicated very quickly to try and gauge, I suppose. I don't have an answer, I guess, is my answer.
I'm just curious if you would change, if and maybe everybody can answer this, if we could conclusively prove that eating large ruminants was better, saved more animals every year, then would you do it? Would that change? Would that influence your decision in any way, do you think?
That's a good question, but my instinct, I was already shaking my head before you'd even asked the question. Just not. I don't know, but maybe I think it would sway some people if their reason for going vegan is environmental, if their reason for going vegan is philosophical in terms of, utilitarianism. But
it's so ingrained, the very idea of eating flesh nauseates me, and I can't eat some of these new burgers that come out that people are all like, oh, we found this like vegan burger, you have to try it, and I'm like, no, I'm gonna hate it. It's like the whole idea, and I mean, I used to eat chicken as a little kid, and I mean, I did eat meat, and I don't remember really hating it. I do remember hating turkey. It was all stringy and but yeah, at some point it became so, and I don't know if that's sort of a learned behavior, or I associated it with eating flesh, and for me it's like, I would find that really hard to do. So
I think I'd probably struggle, because when I was younger, I didn't stop eating meat till I was in my early 20s. Any of it, I just didn't give it a thought. But I think that I remember being at my grand's, and she would be making like stew, and once I'd kind of soaked the gravy off, and I'm chewing for like 2 hours later, and I'm still chewing this thing, and I never really liked mince and all these things that are made with cows. I never had a steak in my life, actually. So maybe my husband, who is omnivorous out the house, he's vegan in the house, that was the deal. And he says I'm missing a trick, but like the thought of it wasn't, of all the things that I did used to eat a lot of, it was probably more salty food like gammon and bacon and all these kinds of things, really highly processed stuff that was no good for me. And I'm probably a candidate for diabetes and heart disease and all sorts of things before I get too much older, just because my diet when I was younger was so poor.
I think it's going to be really interesting. I don't know if your research is going to look more into that, but children that were raised vegan, I mean, I can imagine they will feel similar to me. I stopped eating meat, it was about 13, and already I have this sort of learnt repulsion, I guess. I'm really curious I'm hoping that daughter too, how she feels about meat when she gets a bit older, the idea of it. And
it's interesting, she came out of school really upset one day when there had been a big discussion about her being different that had come up probably at lunchtime or something, but and I thought, well, I'm going to have the conversation, because she's soon at the point where some autonomy is going to be important for her. She needs to have a little bit of agency, as we were speaking about earlier, and if she wants to do something differently, then I need to maybe let that happen, but discuss why and how and all that. But anyway, it turns out that she wasn't upset that she was vegan, she was upset that everyone else wasn't. So I thought that was kind of good. But again, that's about raising her knowing why like the reasons behind the choices that I've made. And she understands her dad makes different choices when he's not at home. So, and I've said, if you want to end up eating stuff similar to dad, then, we need to talk about, no, I don't want to eat animals, mummy, animals are our friends. And it's just as simple as that, and especially now we've got a dog running about the house. That's another ethical discussion for another day, because I'm not really into pet keeping either, but it's a rescue. Anyway, all that, even the word pet I don't like. So there's all these different things. So the kids I'll be focusing on in my research are primary school aged children. So up to high school, but no older than that, at least initially. It might come to be that I need to investigate a bit further. But I think it's going to be more about, hopefully, there are more kids that have been vegan since birth now than ever before. And I would like to focus on them, possibly about the why they're vegan, rather than, do they understand why? Do they know what it means? Do you know what their alternatives are? Are they, how is it discussed? If it is discussed, I mean, there's bound to be, in the same way as people just get fed, a chippy every night, that it's not questioned maybe. So I want to find out exactly what's going on for them and how it is to be vegan, not just at school, but just in life generally. That said, the last year and a bit of the lockdown have been a bit weird, and there's not been that opportunity for kids to be out and mixing so much and discussing these kinds of things or feeling different. But there was one boy in her class who told her that if she ate cow's milk, that she would be whiter, which has all sorts of other connotations.
My God.
So that was an interesting discussion that day after school. But yeah, I don't even remember what your question was. Sorry, Kris.
Can I just go back to Michelle's point as well? Because I definitely want to address it on the podcast, because people might be thinking that, actually, what's the point in being vegan if it is down to the number of animals are killed? So basically, some of the references that I'll go into the podcast at the end, livestock production utilizes 3/4 of all agricultural land, a third of all cereal production, and the United Nations and other leading bodies that are concerned with climate change, for example, and biodiversity loss, say that due to livestock production, species loss is 1,000 times the usual background rate of species loss. So I have heard those kind of arguments before, but for example, and I'm sure people can get much better information by having a quick Google. If you take one field of has to be cleared to raise food for vegan, you're going to get more protein and you're going to feed more people than if you clear it for livestock production. 7 gigatons of plant biomass is required to produce 0.26 gigatons of meat. So I just want to put that on the podcast for people out there to actually go and research that themselves and find that there's a lot of refutation to that claim, actually.
Well, I think that what his point is the accidental, that we only count feeding the world. We only count the animals that we're not eating. We never think about the animals that live on that farmland.
They're still being cleared though, aren't they, for the cows? So you're doing 1.8 billion plus 65 billion ruminants.
Yeah, that's why he was saying the only way to really win it is to go do pasture forage and let the cows out in the field to graze for themselves.
But that's what they're doing in the Amazon, and that's creating a massive problem. They're talking about by 2050, most of the Amazon might actually be gone. But one solution might be, and I wanted to ask you guys if you thought this was vegan, because I know there's a raging debate about this. What about in vitro and cultured meat? Do you consider that vegan? For example, although I probably wouldn't eat it myself now because I've decided to be vegan, and maybe I would change my mind, but some people are very against the idea of cultured in vitro meat being vegan, even if it saves animals' lives, including the livestock and the rainforest, etc. What do you guys think about that?
That goes back to that least harm principle again, doesn't it? If we can have one genetic line of animals that then feeds millions of people and saves millions of other animals, I suppose Singer would say, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, Singer definitely would. I haven't decided yet still. I'm still reading different views on it. My understanding is it still does need some cells from bovine cells in order to start the process. And to me, then that's still it's still animal. ultimately. But I think the biggest problem, I think if it makes people who would not consider veganism eat less factory farmed animal meat, it can't be bad. However, yeah, I don't think I would. But then I'll eat like a vegan burger. The ones that Kris would be like, oh no, but
recommend it to other people though. To say try in vitro, because rather than eat a.
No, I think still this still comes down to this idea that we somehow need it. I think that's still the problem, and that's where I think I find this ethically problematic. We don't. There's more concentrated protein. Then there's kind of contraindications if you eat certain proteins with calcium absorption, and there's all sorts of kind of nutritional elements to this too. I don't know, Bryan. I don't know if you're convinced. I'm not convinced by the argument yet.
I wouldn't eat it myself, but I think we have to kind of like zoom out and really look at this movement as a timeline, and where I think we're really still in the beginning, but we're seeing that turnover. And I think all these steps are really, really important to get us to a meat-free world, which I think is good. That choice is going to be made for us, for people. I don't think it's going to be voluntary. If we continue to, with the relationship we have with the environment right now, it'll be a choice made for us one day. So I'm
hopeful for that. Yeah, that's good. It gives me a lot of hope. Was there not a recent study saying that by 2040 they reckoned in vitro meat could be viable in terms of cost efficiency and whatnot? That would be
great. I think it's an important step that needs to happen. Even when Burger King launched the Impossible Burger, I love going in. I'll get French fries. Sometimes I'll eat an Impossible, and I love seeing just your average person in there. Just you see that green wrapper, and I was in Puerto Rico last semester with a group of students. And that was one of the only places near the campus where we could really eat.
Wow.
And especially with the machismo culture and just seeing so many green wrappers in there, men, women, all different ages.
That's great.
It's like, wow, something's happening.
I think it's a big shift. I mean, now by the time my daughter's a teenager, she's only 7 now, but there's going to be a point at which they're all at high school, and then after school they all want to go to McMurdo or Kentucky Fried Cruelty, I'll say, instead of anyway, all those other fast food joints are available. But it means that she can go with them and have something that's fine for her. But yeah, I don't know. I had another. Sorry, Kris.
No, so I was just going to jump in and say that I'm excited for the pet food industry, or the potential for following the least harm principle and developing something for the pet food industry. So. I mean, we talk about humans and we're omnivores, meaning we can healthily have a wide range of different diets. We really don't need meat or animal products. But some of our companion animals too do. And I'm particularly thinking of cats being obligate carnivores, and a non-meat diet really is problematic. So, I mean, I'm not a vet, so but I know that there's been some research in this area that does sort of, and it is problematic. I'm not sure exactly how problematic, but I mean, I feed my cats meat. It's like there's no question at this point. But I know, and I was actually just trying to look up the references, and I'll put it in the chat afterwards. But there has been research on the impact of companion animals on the environment, and the big negative impact. I see this as a potential way round from both.
For sure. Oh, listen, I don't think anybody would disagree with, if it's going to reduce harm, however you measure that, it's got to be good. I suppose it's like, as opposed to something else that you do that's also ethically thought through or what have you. I had a vegan dog, and we're hoping to make our new puppy will be a veggie dog before too long, but at the moment she's being fed all sorts of I don't know what. Anyway, it's a wee process, but yeah.
How do you if you're feeding your dog a vegan diet? I mean, dogs much easier than cats, obviously.
Yes, I don't have a cat, and I don't have an intention.
But how do you meet because I know dogs still need, what is it, methionine, that is lacking in their diet. How are you handling these?
I'm not. Veggie pets are doing that for me. I have no idea. I'm not going to pretend I don't.
Yeah, because
that said, the veggie dog I had, the vegan dog I had, I mean, he'd just tuck into rice and tofu and peas and carrots. I'm like, you couldn't even sit and eat a carrot and he'd be up, gimme. And he was super healthy. The vet was never worried about it. So whatever it was I was doing, but I also fed him complete dried food that was manufactured by someone else. So probably, again, eco footprint wise, that wouldn't have been ideal.
Yeah, because they do have that. I mean, they tend to get that dilated cardiomyopathy. We saw that a lot in veterinary world with dogs that ate a vegan diet. Just because they're lacking that.
I do know the vet had some concerns, but then didn't seem to be too concerned after she saw him, and he was still fine.
But it is an interesting question. I mean, I consider myself a vegan, but one of the problems that I think about a lot is feeding my cats complete dry cat food. But I am aware that I want to get away from that. However, I'm unable to do that at the moment. And it is something that I'm going to look at when I move countries to somewhere where I'll be able to get probably vegan cat food. But absolutely right, Michelle. It's something that's and again, it's something that you end up having to learn about, because we're told about these things. We're told dogs can eat this and cats can't eat that, or cats can only eat this and they need this. And then when you start doing some research about many different things, including allergies, you find there's lots of things are told in different countries that actually have no basis in truth. I'm not saying that cats are not obligate carnivores, but once you start looking into it, you start to understand it more yourself, and then you think, okay, now I know if I do that, that is going to affect my animal. But this I can change, and it's not. I know I can do a supplement or something.
It's just what we used to do here, Sarah, for humans. It's like, oh, you can't live without meat. There's literally people being, they're suspected of child abuse for raising vegan children because they weren't giving them everything that they needed. But there's plenty of people who still don't give their animals and or humans the right diet, whatever it is they're doing, whether it's meat or not. So
the whole milk industry with remember growing up how much milk was forced down our throats, that it's
the milk mustache adverts.
You have to drink milk. It's so important. If you don't drink milk, you're going to get osteoporosis and die. I mean, there was this push to normalize milk drinking, which really,
I don't think that's changed yet, Michelle, because there's still free milk in Scotland anyway for all the kids up to primary 3. So standard. So I have a real issue with this, but there's been something happened last week. I don't know. We've had the rescue puppy. It's all been chaos. I've not caught up with all the news. However, I do understand they're going to be again getting back to equality law here and inclusiveness. There are going to be some plant-based options available, certainly in Scotland, for children. Although sometimes they say it has to be a dietary requirement, as in a medical dietary requirement rather than an ethical one, which to me is the problem. So these are all the things that are going to be part of the study in the future, certainly.
Good.
I wanted to ask you as well about you're talking about obviously parents and their views, and the child being brought up with their views, including veganism. But of course, veganism affects the environment, as we were just discussing.
Yeah.
Are you going to get into that as well? Because I live somewhere where lots of parents are, and I see them regularly. And obviously, I'm older than them, and it amazes me how much, by not looking at what they're eating, they are going to affect their own children's future, but don't seem to be considering it. And as you said before, you end up being the grumpy person if you try to have this conversation. So I avoid them.
Yeah.
Is it something you're going to be looking at in that sense as well?
I haven't quite got everything together quite yet for where it'll go. I mean, initially, I'm going to be interviewing vegan parents about. I mean, actually, the parents are likely to be vegan or vegan children, although that's going to be exceptional, especially for little kids. The reasons behind the veganism, I think, will be part of that. If it is environmental, then I would imagine. But yeah, you're right. And then we're back to that discussion again. Why are not all environmentalists vegan then? It feels like it's something that should just follow. But some people go vegan because of their health. And again, I think maybe the distinction between plant-based food diet and veganism maybe needs to be made a little bit clearer, whereas before it was one and the same. But I do think there's been a split off from that. And people who are plant-based for health or plant-based for the environment, there might be a little bit of a separation there for people that are plant-based vegan for animals. I think it is a slightly different way of thinking, although everything, I mean, it should be a more holistic thought process, shouldn't it?
Especially with the climate crisis. Sorry.
Right. No, you're right, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, that's why I really like this. I heard about the reducitarian movement, which I actually really like, because I think, especially in the US, I don't know how it is where you guys are, but there is a real sort of anger toward vegans that, oh, she's a vegan, oh, she's going to lecture me. And I think that this reducitarian movement has kind of taken that on, and I'm trying to counteract that by saying, okay, we're not saying you have to be vegan. We're saying maybe you don't eat meat products before 6 p.m. Maybe you have meatless Monday, and really sort of going at it from a more normalized perspective that, hey, it's very normal not to eat meat during the day. It's very normal not to do this, rather than being this sort of vision of the militant vegan. But one of the things that I like that they focus on is that, because you're asking, why are not all conservationists vegan? Why are not all animal caregivers vegan? Well, they're asking the question, why are not people who are concerned about humans not vegan? Because think about what is one of the worst jobs, one of the most dangerous jobs in the US, especially, is meat packaging plants. So if you're someone who's concerned about, especially people who are living at a certain wage level, you really need to be cutting down your meat consumption, because you're endangering humans.
Yeah,
as well.
I totally agree, Michelle. And I suppose I would. It's not just about environmentalists, but anybody involved in social justice, right? The two go hand in hand. Whether it's poor wages, whether it's conditions of employment. The McLibel suit is kind of maybe the most famous version of that. But I mean, that's the tip of the iceberg. Yeah, there's people really. People working in tanneries. We're not even talking about meat necessarily, but people working in tanneries for the leather industry. Really dangerous stuff, for sure. Yeah, no, I just feel like if we viewed, it's maybe a little bit utopian. And I was talking to somebody else about that recently, but it should all just be the one thing, shouldn't it? There's one planet with people on it, with the Amazon rainforest on it, with non-human animals on it, or other than human animals on it. This is all we all have to rely on each other. But I think it's the kind of individualistic way that many cultures have become that create this problem, where, well, I'm all right, I'm fine, and not even thinking about their own future generations. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And then when it comes back to that other question, reducitarianism to me is not enough. It's nowhere near enough, but it's something. So, if somebody says, well, I'm mostly vegan or mostly vegetarian, but it's like, okay, well, you're doing more than most people are doing. So that's a great start. And rather than going, well, that's not enough, it's better to say, I mean, I think it's not enough. I think more needs to be done for that person, but at least they've started a journey. I'm an abolitionist. I just think everybody should quit everything that's got anything to do with any kind of harm to anything, ideally. But then I go out in my car, fossil fuels, blah, 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 right? So we can't.
I think that's important to bring up, though, because something I always think about is the other products I buy that aren't food, right? So I try to buy everything that's not tested on animals. I'm trying to reduce my plastic. I wish I had an EV rather than a gasoline car. But it's just tough, and I think about my clothes is really a place where I play ignorant, where my clothes come from and who makes my clothes and the conditions of the people who make my clothes. And it's so overwhelming that I've just blocked it out, and it's something I struggle with, for sure, when we think about, because I agree, we should be taking this holistic approach. But I'm far from perfect when it comes to
I just think if everyone did something, there's lots of people doing nothing, right? So if everyone does what they can, and then that demand is created, as has happened now, that you can go into Burger King and get, I mean, I've never been in, so I don't know, but you can get these things. So this is great, right? This is the start of a process. And I do think, I never thought it would be within my lifetime, but I think it might be, if not mine, my daughter's lifetime, where you're right, the choice will just be made. There'll not be one that we consciously do, because more and more people, especially younger people really care about the planet. Greta Thunberg and all that's kind of that movement that's kind of grown up from that. It's fantastic. And you can't really, even David Attenborough's talking about eating less or no meat, right? If nobody's going to listen to Dave, man, nobody's going to listen to anyone, right? So these things are so important. Yeah, I have folk. I mean, yeah, I don't buy organic vegetables all the time, because you've got, again, I've prioritized my list, right? So I've got animal rights, veganism stuff at the top, organic, fair trade, kind of, it depends on the product, and again, it's sometimes down to price, but maybe that's just about things becoming more viable, which means about demand, supply and demand, basic economics. It'll get there in the end. I really do think so, but there needs, the shift is gradual, perhaps.
I think
soon enough for me, but that's just me being impatient. That's all. Sorry, Sarah.
I think Brian's got a good point about labelling, because obviously all 5 of us do have some kind of consideration of our effect on the planet, and on animals. But sometimes, as you say, it's just, you need to have something, you need to buy something quickly, and unless you've researched it before, or you're on your phone going, how environmentally friendly this, or how is this fair trade or whatever, sometimes you just go, I just need to get that. So sometimes we're making decisions because we're not being informed in the shops, and I think that absolutely needs to start happening. I saw something the other day about a lady. Sometimes I've a quick look at the Daily Mail to see what's going on in.
Oh, you don't say that.
I do like to have a look. And there was a lady who was she'd taken all the plastics off at Aldi. She'd taken all the plastics off all the goods and left them with the lady at the lady at the I can't think of the word, the person, the checkout person. Right. And they're obviously then you can go to the comments in the Daily Mail and see, how people are commenting and stuff like that. Some people are really against it, and some people are like, really for it. And I think a lot of that stuff, we need to start telling people who are selling us things, this is what we want. This is what, and also governments need to start listening about informing us. If they, for example, if they want us to have reduced climate, anything that affects the climate, then we need to be informed that if you buy this product, this is going to affect the climate by this much, not the number of amount of CO2, because who understands that, but maybe we can have so many footprint points a day or something along those lines, and this is like 15 footprint points. Or
so instead of Weight Watchers, it's like Planet Watchers. Oh man, we're on it. We oops, I've just pulled my video out. Sorry about that.
You're so excited.
There's also a giant bumblebee trying to get out of my window here, so excuse me a moment.
Yeah, no worries.
Well, I know that as we've been talking in classes about plastics, microplastics, Brian, I've really tried to switch over to going back to, because all my clothes used to be cotton, because I'm very sensitive to everything. I don't like seams, I don't like tags, and so I used to have all these cotton clothes. And it became harder and harder to find them, and I gave up. And so as we've been teaching about plastic crisis, I've been trying to transfer back to all cotton clothes. It is almost impossible. Brian and I are in Central Florida, which is Central Florida. So not exactly the most environmentally friendly part of the world anyway. But yeah, I cannot find all cotton shirts. Unless, I go order them online and then they, don't fit, or they don't. I mean, so it's just, again, back to your labeling. It is, I have to look through 100 shirts to find one that's all cotton.
Yeah. I think part of the problem is marketers, they capitalize on this, right? They recognize that you want environmentally friendly or animal friendly products. So they put it on their labeling because they know that's what people want. And that's a little bit what my paper looks at with the happy hen. So they recognize that people they want ethically produced eggs. They want they want to believe that the hens were free ranged and lived a happy life. So they put these little happy hens on the egg boxes and images of sort of idealized landscapes with the farmer sitting with his hen. And so people want this, they look for these labels, but they also want to be easily
their conscience to be salved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a double-edged sword. You demand these products, and the producers sort of try and woo you in. Ads is more animal friendly, blah blah blah. So it's like it's almost impossible to sort of without driving yourself crazy with.
I know. Sorry, Brian.
I was just gonna say, being a conscious consumer is like a full-time job. You have to do research, finding the products, you know, and even Michelle looking for cotton shirts. So if you get the cotton shirts, right, to reduce the microplastics, where are they coming from? Where are they being shipped from? You know,
are they being grown?
Right. You know, Target right now has some really great products. I have paper deodorant. They have laundry detergent coming in boxes now, but is supporting Target really great for the environment? Should I be supporting these products? And then we have to worry about who owns some of these, you know, eco-friendly companies. What is their, who's their, you know, parent company? What are those connections? And some days, you know, I'm researching, trying to find like a good eco-friendly toothpaste right now. I don't really like Bite. It's one of the biggest ones here. And it's a full-time job. And I just give up sometimes because I'm like, all right, I'll do this again another day.
Well, and I tell the students too, as we're talking about environmental impact, I will mention cruelty-free products as we're talking about like coral safe sunscreens, and I will mention cruelty-free products. And I'm just amazed at the blank stares that nobody has thought through the cosmetics. And I'll give a plug to a really great website called Cruelty Free Kitty. If you go to Cruelty Free Kitty, they list products, vegan products, vegetarian products, cruelty-free products, and just the different levels, because this one might be labeled as, you know, not animal tested, but it's sold in China, so it has to be tested on animals there. And it might be, you know, so makes it a lot easier because we are lazy consumers. You know, we don't want to have to think too hard. So if we have a list, these are the items I can buy, somebody else has done the work, I think we're a whole lot more likely to.
Apparently China's just stopped that. Apparently China's just stopped the requirements. Somebody messaged me the other week. I don't know if you guys know more about that.
I heard that in a couple of days ago. Is it China completely, or is it just some of the companies that sell out of China?
Somebody just fleetingly sent it to me. I had a quick look and I haven't looked into it any further.
But then, I mean, it's like, you know, well, this company, other than their sales in China, so do they just not sell in China? It is impossible to be vegan, you know, non-animal tested, vegan, cruelty-free, organic, fair trade, environmental, ecological, blah, 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 right? There's going to have to be some, and that's maybe where everybody sits on a sliding scale, but a lot of people aren't even looking at the scale. And those are the people I feel that are the most important to target, right? I
wonder if they're the happiest though. Because I don't know if
you're
so overwhelmed by how much is happening out there, and I sometimes think, is it just better to know nothing and get on with your life? Of course, it's not for the consequences for other beings, but and other humans.
Though there is something to be said though for, you know, had I not ever seen that leaflet, my life would be very different. That's for sure.
I wonder with the students, you know, I feel a bit of guilt sometimes introducing the fact that they should be thinking about these things. Am I then making their lives, you know, more challenging and more
that's your job, to create critical thinkers.
I know, Michelle. It is really. I did want to ask Brian really fast, what do you think about because you're I'm sure the students know you're vegan. I'm wondering if you have a lot of students that approach you and ask you, you know, hey, how do I become a vegan? Is there a lot of young people interest in this?
I've had a few. I wouldn't say it's a lot of our students, but they are certainly grateful for being shared the information that we do share, right? They're like, I had no idea. Thank you for telling me this. So I think that's really important, especially, you know, when we think about the youth, you know, and I think this, you know, young people today are just incredible. They have faced things that are just astronomical. They're curious, they're informed. So I'm really excited to see, you know, when I'm an old geezer, what they have going on, because I'm really, really hopeful for that.
I agree. I mean, in the last couple of years, I actually, I used to, I'd make no bones about the fact I'm vegan. I use it in a lot of teaching, actually, just, in terms of norms and values. Sociology lends itself to that. But actually, the last couple of years, there's been vegans already in class. That they just already are. Not the majority by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a notable shift. And that's been for a variety of different reasons through their lives. But you're talking 17, 18-year-olds that are, maybe been part of seeing this shift in consciousness over the last 5 years, I would say, probably more than anything. So it's great. I have great hope for the future. I'm going to definitely hope, whether it's in vitro meat, whether it's just people realizing that if you take your kids to the farm on Easter Sunday, the city farm, and get them to feed the lambs, don't then feed them lamb for Easter Sunday dinner, right? Stuff like that. But again, it's just connections. It's information, whether it's labeling on products, Sarah, or whatever it had. But that's maybe our job, those of us that have had a shift in conscious, to just try and keep that momentum moving. But it's definitely moving in the right direction.
And I think it goes back to what Michelle was saying. And you said feeling a bit guilty, and then you said no, it's your job to make people think critically. I don't know if you found it, but I've found that there's sometimes some blaming of generations of why we're in the world state we're in. And it's almost, I often think, well, look, I've been vegetarian for like so many years, and I've been trying and I've been telling people, but you're still lumbered as one of the generations that is, that is responsible. And people that are saying it sometimes are people who are not vegan and are not environmentally friendly.
Yeah, but
I don't know how you guys challenge that, because I just sometimes I'm like dumbfounded with that.
I challenge them with their environmental waste, their electronic waste, in that, when they say things about older generations, I say, yeah, and we, older generations were not going through a TV every 2 years. They weren't going through 17 phones by the time they were 17. They weren't going through, so I try to really wake them up as far as that it isn't that this generation did that and this generation's doing this. It's that you have to take responsibility for the things that you personally are doing.
Yeah, there was a lot less waste in previous generations, wasn't there? And actually, I mean, my gran would have known how to catch and kill and pluck and stuff a chicken or something. She would have known that, because things were a little bit more different. I guess capitalism has got a lot to answer for, but yeah, it was a different kind of time. But then, the vegan society is nearly 80 years old. There's been people talking about this for a long time. Also, though, we have it's great if they want to challenge, but they need to also be willing to be challenged, I think, don't they?
And I kind of think if people just focused a bit more on themselves and what they can do, rather than criticizing what others are not doing, because nobody's perfect, and we should just focus more on our own sort of faults and what we can do. Rather, I think it's mostly destructive when you sort of criticize people for eating meat or just whatever.
Yeah, it doesn't resolve anything. You're absolutely right. But when I was out shouting every Saturday and going out and leafleting people and being all Mrs. Angry, it didn't probably change a few of mine through the leaflets or whatever. But my behaviour didn't really resolve anything. But you can understand it's the same as the people who are out picketing or campaigning just now. Some of them are really angry.
But it starts making people think, doesn't it, though? I mean, it might not be that particular moment, but then you're one of 30 people that they've listened to. So they might forget that it's you specifically. Yeah, but they go, why are people shouting about this? Why are people saying these things?
Right. It's the same as any social movement. You think about the Black Lives Matter movement now. It's, anti-racism has been around as long as there's been racism, right? It's just goes without saying, but yeah, and I think it's just a shift in awareness, maybe. And you're right, maybe people don't change right there and then, but maybe ultimately they will at some point. It doesn't mean you shouldn't try the way.
Exactly.
I think we need all of the approaches. I don't think any approach is wrong. I'm teaching a policy and advocacy class this semester, and I'm trying to really enforce that, because a lot of our students like to criticize PETA. Are they perfect? Absolutely not. Do they have a role to play? 100%. We need people shouting. We need people screaming and yelling, and we need people that are angry, but we also need people that are intimate and calm and, you know, taking that educational approach. And we just need it all. We need it all.
It's like any social justice movement. Though, even we're talking about that. You're talking about the suffragette movement, right? Or the women's rights movement, rather. You had the suffragettes. You have these, but you have, you know, and then you also had people working with policymakers, and amongst it all very quietly. So yeah, it's all because people are different and people respond to different things. So yeah, as long as we're all doing something, we'll get there. I'm fairly sure. I'm positive.
So Bryan, you were saying that you think the decision will be made for us. What do you envision then?
I just think, you know, losing out on those resources and you know, maybe we've reached that tipping point where it's really hard to kind of turn back the time, and the availability of resources and who controls resources. And I think that's where the choice is going to be made. There's just not going to be those resources available.
So do you think it will be political or apocalyptic?
I'm a huge sci-fi nerd, so I always lean towards that apocalyptic, but in reality, I think it'll be very political. I do think it'll be very political.
Right.
Everything's political anyway, isn't
it? So, yeah.
All right, so yeah, that's a good place to end. Thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time. Wave.